Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 13, the Hansa Avatar answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. Text 23 onwards. So previously we studied how Hansa Avatar came and four Kumaras, headed by Sanak Kumar. He asked his question to Lord Hansa that who are you? So the whole thing starts from there. Who are you? So he's further saying, Panchatma Keshu Bhuteshu Samaneshu Chavastuta Ko Bhavaniti Vah Prashno Vacharambo Hi Anartakaha. If by asking me, who are you, you are referring to the material body, then I must point out that all material bodies are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus, you should have asked, who are you 5? If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus, it appears that in asking my identity, you are merely speaking words without any real meaning or purpose. Oh, that's a deep chastisement for the 4 Kumaras. If somebody chastises me for this, I will be thinking, yeah, you're right. Why did they ask this question? But he's chastising Kumaras, who are already self-realized souls. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this verse as follows. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna demonstrated that if the sages accepted the impersonal philosophy that all living beings are ultimately one in all respects, their question, who are you, was meaningless, since there would be no philosophical basis to distinguish one manifestation of spirit soul from another. In this verse, the Lord refutes the false identification with the material body composed of 5 elements. If the sages accepted the body as a self, then their question was meaningless, since they would have to ask, who are you 5? If the sages replied that although the body is composed basically of 5 elements, and these elements can be considered a single substance in the form of the whole body, then the Lord has already replied by the words, Samaneshu Chavastuta. The bodies of human beings, demigods, animals, etc. are all composed of the same 5 elements and are essentially the same. Therefore, the question, who are you, is ultimately meaningless. Thus, if one accepts either the theory that all living entities are ultimately the same, or the theory that all living entities are ultimately non-different from the material bodies, in both cases, the question of the sages is meaningless. Srila Madhvacharya points out in this regard that the question of the sages was not appropriate, since they had already seen their father, Lord Brahma, worshipping the lotus feet of Lord Hansa. Since their spiritual master and father was worshipping Lord Hansa, they should have immediately understood the Lord's position, and their question is thus meaningless. Mansa vachasa adrishtaya griyate anyarapindriya aham evajna matton anyad iti buddhya adva manjasa. Within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone and nothing besides. All of you, please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. So Lord Hansa is saying, whatever you see, perceive, it's me alone, because obviously everything is energy of Krishna. Lord Krishna has already explained that if the sages consider all living entities to be the same, or if they consider the living entity to be the same as his body, then their question, who are you, is inappropriate. Now the Lord refutes the conception that he is a supreme God, far beyond and different from everything within this world. Modern agnostic philosophers preach that God created the world and then retired or went away. According to them, God has no tangible connection with this world, nor does he interfere in human affairs. Ultimately, they claim God is so great that he cannot be known. This is what people generally say, oh, God is so great. Just like when in Christianity they say Moses went to this burning bush and he got the message from burning bush. And why burning bush? Because nobody can see God. He is so great. Well, yeah, definitely he is very great, but if he wants to give his darshan to everybody, why can't we see him? But this is modern day philosophy. Nobody can see him. So if you think you can make deities of his form and worship, this is blasphemy. No, it's all mentioned in the scriptures. Therefore, no one should waste time trying to understand God. This is what these so-called philosophers say. To refute such foolish ideas, the Lord here explains that since everything is an expansion of his potency, is non-different from anything. Nothing can exist separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus everything shares in the Lord's nature, although some manifestations are superior and others inferior. The Lord is testing the intelligence of the sages by pointing out various contradictions in the questions. Even if the Lord is supreme, he is not different from his creation. Therefore, what's the meaning of the question, who are you? We can clearly say that the Lord is paving the way for a deep discussion of spiritual knowledge. So something deeper is coming. Guneshva vishatete jo gunashetasi cha prajaha jivasya deho bhayam gunashetu madatmana. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. Lord Krishna, in the form of Hans Avatar, on the pretext of finding contradictions in the simple inquiry of the sons of Brahma, who are you, is actually preparing to teach the sages perfect spiritual knowledge. But only after first rejecting two false concepts of life, namely that all living entities are the same in all respects. So that is also false. And that the living entity is identical with his outward or subtle body. Lord Krishna now answers the difficult question that puzzled even Lord Brahma. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the sons of Lord Brahma were thinking as follows. Our dear Lord, if it is indeed true that we are unintelligent, still your Lordship has stated that you are actually everything, because everything is the expansion of your potency. Therefore, you are also the mind and the sense objects, which are the subject matter of our question. The material sense objects always enter into the functions of the mind. And similarly, the mind always enters into the material sense objects. Thus, it is proper that we inquire from your Lordship about the process by which the sense objects will no longer enter the mind and the mind will no longer enter the sense objects. Please be merciful and give us the answer. The Lord answers as follows. My dear sons, it is a fact that the mind enters into the material sense objects because it starts thinking about the sense objects. And the sense objects enter the mind because then it becomes really, and the craving happens, and willing to enjoy those sense objects. Thus, although the living entity is actually part and parcel of me, being as I am also eternally conscious, and although the eternal form of the living entity is spiritual, in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and the sense objects, which act as covering designations of the eternal soul. Since it's a natural function of the material mind and sense objects to mutually interact, How can you possibly endeavor to prevent such a mutual attraction? Since both the material mind and sense objects are useless, they both should be completely given up, and thus automatically you'll be free from all material duality. So, but when we are in the conditioned state, we think of these sense objects so much that we cannot think of anything else. The mind is completely absorbed. But ultimately, yes, they both are useless and they should be given up, material mind and the sense objects. If they don't give us real pleasure, we think they are giving us a pleasure. They don't. Srila Sridhar Swami points out that the symptom of the material mind is a tendency to consider oneself to be the ultimate doer and enjoyer. Naturally, one with such a puffed up mentality is helplessly attracted by the sense objects. One who considers himself to be the doer and enjoyer will be irresistibly attracted to the means for attaining sense gratification and false prestige, namely exploitation of material objects. Above the material mind, however, is intelligence, which can perceive the existence of the eternal spirit soul. It's not possible to separate the material mind from the sense objects because they naturally exist together. Therefore, by intelligence, one must realize one's eternal form as spirit soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and completely reject the bogus material mentality. One who revives his original spiritual mentality becomes automatically detached from material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. When the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. So the intelligence, with intelligence, earlier also it is that the intelligence should be sharp as an axe, and when you should be able to cut the attachment to the material world. By devotional service to the Lord, such detachment and intelligence automatically awaken, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form, one is properly situated in eternal consciousness. Otherwise, the mind will always be going towards the sense objects. Guneshu cha vishachittam abhikshanam gunasevaya gunasha chitta prabhava madrup ubhayam tyajet. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. And that's the only way. Otherwise, like yogis, what they do, they try to take the mind away from sense objects. But they haven't given a higher taste or better engagement to the mind. It will run towards the sense objects only. The Lord here states that it's most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects, because the material mind, by definition, considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all material activities, but instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Now, since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? And not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also because of the mind's desires, because the desires are all stored in the mind. The material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. The separation between the mind and sense objects is not actually feasible, nor does it serve any purpose. So without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. So that's the only way possible. Jagrita Swapna Sushuptam Cha Gunato Buddhi Vrittaya Tasam Vilakshano Jiva Sakshitvena Vinishchita. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the three functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these three states and thus remains as a witness to them. And the spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world, having no permanent or natural relationship with it. Real renunciation means to give up this illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross forms. Sushuptam or deep sleep indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. These three states are described by Lord Krishna as follows. One should know the wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep, dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The fourth element, pure consciousness, is different from these three and pervades them. Real freedom means sakshitvena, or to exist as a witness to the functions of illusion. Such an advantageous position is achieved by development of Krishna consciousness. So deep, dreamless sleep, we think, oh, it's very good, I slept like a log, but it's in mode of ignorance, because we forget everything. Who we are, everything we forget. Yarhi samsriti bandhu ayam, atmano guna vrittidha, mai turiyat stito jayat, tyagastad guna chetasam. The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which affords him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. So the spirit soul is entrapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which affords him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. So that is a stage we need to attain beyond goodness also. Lord Krishna now specifically answers the questions that the sages originally placed before Lord Brahma. Ultimately, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material sense objects and modes of nature. But because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations. By destroying this false identification with matter, the soul gives up the illusory occupations awarded by the modes of nature. It is clearly stated in these words that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion. He is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. Then he can be freed from the illusion. So we are so bound up in this network of the illusion of the material modes of nature, we cannot get out of it on our own. So only who's free, he can free us up. So Krishna has sent his representatives. So Srila Prabhupada, like a bona fide Acharya, when he comes, he is free, completely free. So he can remove or cut the entanglements, cut the ropes that are binding us. And how he cuts? He cuts by his instructions. It means he gives us the intelligence by which we then slowly cut off those ropes. That's why it's called Guru. Guru means heavy. Literally, it means heavy. And Sadhu. Sadhu means one who cuts these bonds. And Guru means heavy because of his instructions. Ahankara kritam bandham atmano artha viparyaya vidva nirvidya sansara chintam turya stitis tyajet. The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage, which awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. So false ego. False ego is, I'm this body. That's it. And then everything starts. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. So intelligent person. So one whose intelligence is really working or really sharp. That is a real intelligence. It's not that if somebody has become an IAS officer, he is intelligent, or if somebody is very good businessman, he is intelligent. Real intelligence is what? Should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and to remain situated in the Lord. That is real intelligence. Otherwise, if somebody is really good leader, political leader or business leader, or a sportsman or a movie actor or really big person, businessman or entrepreneur, what is going to happen next life? He's going to take birth again and again struggle in this material world, go through birth, old age, disease, death, no matter which body he gets. So what's the use of that intelligence? That in this lifetime I have created so many wonderful things. But next lifetime I could be killed by those wonderful things. What's the point? Srila Sridhar Swami comments as follows. How does material existence cause the bondage of the living entity, and how can such bondage be given up? The Lord explains here by the word ahankara kritam. Because of false ego, one is bound up in the network of illusion. Artha viparyayam indicates that although the living entity desires blissful life, eternity, and knowledge, he adopts procedures that actually cover over his eternal blissful nature and give him exactly the opposite result. The living entity does not want death and suffering, but these are actually the results of material existence, which is therefore useless for all practical purposes. An intelligent person should contemplate the unhappiness of material life and thus become situated in the transcendental Lord. The word sansara chintam can be understood as follows. Sansar or material existence indicates material intelligence, because material existence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material body. Because of this misidentification, one becomes overwhelmed with sansara chintam, anxiety to enjoy the material world. One should become situated in the Lord and give up such useless anxiety. It's useless. It is useless. It doesn't take us anywhere. Only it takes us is next cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death. And it could be in the lower species of life. It could be in the lower planets. So what is the use of this material intelligence and all the achievements and all the possessions we have accumulated in this lifetime? So real intelligence is when the person inquires, how do I get out of all this cycle? Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.